Hello, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate and inspire romanticism through passionate people doing incredible things. Hi, I'm Trey. You can find me at OrpheTunes on most social media platforms. And as always, I am joined by my fantastic co host, Emily. Let me
Hello.
do this. Emily!
Here I am. Poof.
uh, and we are also joined by our moderator, Josh. Hi, Josh.
Hello, hello.
Um, well, I don't know about you, but I am so looking forward to get to talk to this incredible guest this evening. I have had a chance to look at his Instagram. We've been able to look at some of the photography that he's done. But Emily, would you do a nice introduction for our lovely guest here?
I would love to. Doug is like an adventure photographer. He has visited all 7 continents, 47 of the 50 states, basically everywhere. And he went on a photographic expedition in Antarctica. I almost couldn't say that. In January, and with the National Geographic ship Resolution, and he has had so many adventures, and we're here to talk all about them. Please welcome Doug Talbott.
Yeah.
It's great to be here with you all, to say the least. Oh my goodness. Where should we start? My goodness, pick a country or pick a continent.
Well, I want to know what got you interested in photographing in general.
Well, that's a great question. It really started. I've thought a lot about this, and I want to go back to mom and dad, who are no longer here, but they mom more than dad. They both loved photography. Mom loved to take pictures. Dad more just to look at pictures. He wasn't, that interested, in taking it. And I remember my first experience with a camera. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and it was one of those little brownie cameras that you didn't hold up to your eye. You looked down, and it had there was a little piece of glass kind of thing, and you looked through that, and so you walked around like this, and that was my first introduction, to pictures, and I'd always been fascinated by them because our house. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and we had lots of pictures throughout the house, but my passion for travel was really hatched there, because inside this house, which had originally belonged to my grandfather, Dad's dad, there was this incredible room, and it was called the cabin. And it was a large room that was duplicated the inside of a log cabin, and the walls had the big wooden beams in them, and on the ground were bear rugs, and then there were trophies throughout on the wall. And I remember some of my earliest memories were particularly around Christmas, because we would go down in the cabin, and it had a big stone fireplace, and we would decorate all of the animals there, and then we'd call up the chimney. Everybody would, give their wishes for Christmas, what they wanted to get. And Big Bud, that was Dad's dad, wrote a book called The Cabin, and it was stories about how he collected those trophies. And I remember thinking that, gee, would it be fun to visit those places? And from a very young age, I really wasn't that interested in hunting per se. Although, to Dad, it was important that we do hunting, and we did primarily ducks and geese. And we went on some great trips. I remember we went up to, when I was, oh my gosh, we lived in Dayton. We would go up to Sandusky, Ohio, which was on the shore of Lake Erie, and we would hunt up there with my Uncle Bud, who was just a terrific guide too. And we would duck hunt, and we had a a Chesapeake Bay retriever named Chief. And we'd take Chief in the car and go up and hunt there. And that went on for, well, several years. I remember when I was 15, we flew from Dayton, Ohio to Stuttgart, Arkansas. And, you know, Stuttgart is about a 3 or 4 hour drive south. I think it's southwest of us. Little town of about 5,000. And I remember standing there on the shore, not the shore, but on these rice fields. What they did was each fall they flood the rice fields. And I looked off in the distance, and I said, "Oh my gosh, look at that! That's a thunderstorm coming in." And the guide, never forget his name. His name was Jiggs, was there, and he said, "Doug, that's not a thunderstorm. Those are ducks." And if you look at Stuttgart, it is the kind of the bottom of the funnel of the Midwest Flyway. And each year during the fall, the ducks migrate from Canada down to little old Stuttgart, Arkansas. And so we put on these hip waders, and we'd go out, you know, before dawn. We'd stand behind these trees, and there'd be a clearing of about, oh my gosh, 20 yards maybe, circular, and they'd have the decoys out there, and then the guides, you know, would call the ducks in, and we'd shoot them. And Dad was always really good about saying, you know, we're never going to kill more than we can eat, and that was really planted a seed inside of me about conservation and the importance of not taking too much. And he never talked about, you know, wanting to take big trophies like his dad had done. And so those two things began to meld for me, the travel, of course, and then the interest in conservation. And photography grew because Mom and Dad were very encouraging of my photography. And I remember Mom had a shell cabinet that she had built into the walls of the house in one room in Dayton. And I remember when I was 16, I took pictures of the shell cabinet and gave it to her. And that's where my interest in sharing my photography, I think, was really born and nurtured, because she was so appreciative of, you know, the fact that I had put together a little photo album for her. And that love of sharing pictures has just grown, you know, through the many years, because I do have that Instagram account, and I do have this calendar, and I've found that over the years, my passion for photography really has grown primarily towards nature photography and wildlife. Although I I have done 10 weddings in the last 5 years. And that's a whole different kind of wildlife, let me tell you. it's, it's fortunately,
confirm.
yes, exactly, Emily. It's the most stressful kind of photography I've ever done. And it quickly, this is not something that I want to make my living doing. And God bless the people who want to be wedding photographers, because that's a very difficult kind of photography, because people are so stressed out, and the amount of pressure that you feel is enormous. Because the thing I love about nature photography is that if I blow a picture of a bird or an elk or a deer or whatever, it doesn't matter. I mean, the animal doesn't care. But if you blow a picture at a wedding, you will hear about it for a long time. And have had friends who have told me that um, they have lost, you know, wedding pictures, and that it was just a nightmare. Fortunately, that never happened to me, so we never had to do that. Um, but seriously, the love of travel, which mom and dad and actually my grandmother, really helped inspire too, because she took us on some wonderful trips down to the Caribbean, and we went to Jamaica and Nassau, Eleuthera, Exuma, um, and that again just sparked my love of seeing different parts of the world. And what I've grown to appreciate is that cultures around the world, really all of us are uniquely the same. I mean, we all basically want the same things. We want to love and be loved. We want to basically have a freedom of choice, and we want to be able to live our lives in peace. And all the rest of the stuff, the differences in food and dress and language, I find really interesting. But I'm most interested in getting to know the people, in the particular places we've been, which we've been very, very fortunate. And Rose, this is Stella, our husky, who is over here, who's
Hi,
calling
Stella.
out. Hi, Stella. You want to say hi to everybody? Come here. Come here. Yeah, come here. She wants to go outside. So in a minute, I'll dash.
You can take a break if you want. Actually, and I was going to ask you, since we have an interruption, I'm hearing a sound in the background that sounds like music or a television on. And I'm worried
I
about...
will turn that. Yeah, I will turn that off.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
no
worried
problem.
about the
Okay.
recording, so it's fine.
No problem. Let me do this. Let me literally, it'll take 30 seconds.
Yeah, go for it. All
right. Let's go let her out. I'll turn off that sound, and I'll be right back.
Okay, that's fine. We'll be here.
Thanks. Okay. Come on. Come on, babe.
Bye, Stella.
Bye, Stella.
I don't know if you hear Velvet, but she actually almost tipped over the light. She was tearing through the room. There she goes again. Stop. Did you see the light move?
No.
She's actually like attacking it. I don't know. It's like she's never done that before. She's messed the rug up. She keeps tearing through the room, grabbing at things. She's found some tissue paper and keeps rattling it. And I was like, my mic's going to pick that up. I tried muting my mic thinking I was like, this is... Yeah, she's... I should turn the camera over there. She's throwing things around. This is not normal behavior for her.
For our viewing audience right now, Velvet is Emily's black cat, and if you can see her tail every now and then, it is in the bottom right-hand corner. Oh, there she is. So Doug, that is Velvet, Emily's cat.
Velvet.
Hi, Velvet.
She's being a cat right now.
She's being She's like had caffeine or something. I don't know what's gotten.
We have 3 cats. We have Harry and William and Lucy. So
good names.
They're wandering around here somewhere, but that's all right. So I'm sorry about that noise. I turned off the TV, and Stella's outside, so we should be okay. So
we're good to
continuing. Where were we? Let's see.
You were talking about how other cultures really are very similar to ours.
Yeah.
In some basic ways.
It really is. And we've been so lucky to travel to these different places. We were, in the fall of 2019, Rosie, my wife, and I, we went to Australia. And we flew in from LA. We flew from here to LA, and then LA to Melbourne. 14 and a half hours. The good news is we'd saved up enough money so we could fly business class. So we were able to, be a little more comfortable, to say the least. But we started off in Melbourne with, and we went with a tour group we've been with before called Tauk, Tauck.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an older organization. They've been around since about 1920, and they're great. Expensive, but certainly worth it, because it was a smaller group, and the guide was just amazing. It's this walking encyclopedia of the history of Australia. But we started off in Melbourne, and then we flew to Ayers Rock, which is, oh my gosh, we could do a whole show on Ayers Rock. I mean, that's an amazing monument. It's this giant mountain that's about 80% underground. Um, what's visible on the ground to the top is about 1,200 feet, and it's about 5 miles in circumference, and it changes color. So from a photographic perspective, it's just wonderful, because it apparently there's a lot of iron ore in the mountain, and at night, I'm sorry, at sunset, it's a bright orange, because the light is reflecting off the iron ore.
Wow.
But then, yeah, oh, it's gorgeous. We've got, well, a picture up here on the wall of it, which is very nice. But then we went back the following morning, and it's a dark brown, because again, the light is not shining as brightly on it. And there's a whole history about that mountain and how it's sacred land. And people used to be allowed to walk up on top, and that stopped, as a matter of fact, on our trip, because it was returned, the mountain was returned to the indigenous people, and it's sacred land to them, which is great. And I'm glad they stopped, allowing people to climb up there, because unfortunately, some folks have carved their initials in it, and just doing things that they shouldn't.
Yeah,
And
vandalism isn't cool.
then, good point. It's like, oh, Mom, why? But my point being that to get up there was just a rope, and people were pulling themselves up, and there aren't any steps. And unfortunately, some people have, fallen from it. So I'm glad they stopped the tourist part of it. But that was a lot of fun to go to. And then from there, we flew up to Cairns, which is up on the northeast coast, and got on a big catamaran. And we went out to the Great Barrier Reef. And I had waited to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef since I was 10 years old. And there we were. Let's see, where was that? That was so that was 4 years ago. So I was 68.
4 years
So
ago was 1968.
I waited 58 years to scuba dive on the Great
Wow.
Barrier Reef.
Gosh. Okay.
And that's been so much fun, because we've done a lot of scuba diving all over the world. And the what was fun, Rosie decided to do a different kind of trip. She or diving. They have, you put on these big helmets that sit on top of your head and rest on your shoulders, and they have an air hose going the surface, and then you walk down this underwater platform.
Oh.
And so she decided to do that. I went scuba diving, and I was the only one who signed up for 2 dives. And so on the second dive, it was just myself and this, I'll never forget it. Her name was Carmel. She was the guide. And when she discovered that I was competent, she took me places that they normally don't, which was so much fun.
That's
so
awesome.
I got yeah, it was really exciting to see parts of the Great Barrier Reef that most people don't get to see. And even back then, though, they were having bleaching problems with the coral from the warmer waters, which unfortunately is still going on, not only there, but in other parts of the world. And particularly with this heat wave that's going on, we've seen the extremely warm waters down the Florida Keys. And that's a big concern, because coral reefs are such a protective barrier in many ways, and also they're a breeding ground for so many, fish and sea life. Um, so, and then we went. Of course, if you go to Australia, you got to go to the Sydney Opera House. So we went
Oh
down there.
yeah.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful structure. Oh, Trey, are you into opera?
Uh,
I love that question so much. I'm gonna clip that.
um, I actually have 2 degrees in music, and I trained to be a classical singer for about 8 years.
Oh my goodness! Well, congratulations.
Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, we'll have Emily. We'll do a show on his singing one day.
I love that. That'll be
That
great.
would that'd be fun. So that was great to see that opera house.
Yeah.
And Sydney itself. And there's quite a contrast between Sydney and Melbourne.
Mhm.
Sydney is much more cosmopolitan and reminded me very much of New York,
Okay.
which is a terrific city in terms of opportunity. I would never live there, but it was. It's extremely crowded, and Sydney's the same way. Whereas Melbourne had a much more, how to put it, just congenial atmosphere, and it was just when I win Publishers Clearinghouse or the lottery,
Right.
that I'm really the joke of the family because I've been playing these for decades, and I think I've won a total of $100 and spent far more than that.
Yeah. Just the little
Anyway.
cards to go in the camera aren't much cheaper than that anymore. So,
Exactly. And so I seriously would love to win one of those so I could have a condo in Melbourne
of course.
and tour Australia. But anyway, back focusing more on the photography.
We'll keep you in
well-
mind for when we win the lottery.
Yeah, exactly. I suddenly will get all of these emails. Hi, Doug. Remember me?
Right.
It's like they're gonna kind of come out of the woodwork. One of the things I say, like, even though we aren't winning the lottery, or even though we're not the $1 billion winner of the lottery, it seems like you've done a lot of things based on your biography, based on your the photos that you've taken, that you've experienced a wealth that not many other people get to see, and you get to see a side of life that, again, not everyone gets to see, and I think that has a lot of value. One of the questions that we got in our chat from Sandra was, what has been your favorite place to do a photo shoot?
Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you, Sandra. The reality of that, or the answer to that, is there is no favorite place because there's several of them. And I'm going to jump back to.
I guess
Yeah.
what are a few of your favorites then?
That's what I'm gonna. Certainly one of them is Australia. I mean, Australia is so. Oh, it's a photographer's paradise. Just for example, Ayers Rock. I mean, just photographing. There are caves. Most people don't know this, but there are caves at the base of Ayers Rock too, and those go back thousands of years. And they're paintings and markings in the caves.
Oh, neat.
Which is, there's a whole history about that, the Aborigines, and that was certainly one of the highlights of that, there. And of course the kangaroos, you can't go to Australia and not enjoy, the kangaroos.
We
the
probably enjoy them more than they do, right?
That's true. The ruse. And then let's jump over to Africa. We were there in October of last year, and we were in Botswana primarily. We flew in from Atlanta to Johannesburg. That was only a 15-hour and 15-minute flight. There, so getting there is, shall we say, tiring.
Yeah.
But it's worth every penny. We didn't. We just spent the night actually in Johannesburg, and then we went up to Victoria Falls. That was a really interesting place to photograph because we were there during the dry season. And Victoria, you see, it's basically, think of a mini Grand Canyon. It's about a mile long. It's twice as high as Niagara Falls, about 300. It's about 360 some feet high. And the pictures you normally see, the entire canyon just cascading, like a waterfall, the whole thing is. But when we were there in the dry season, there were just um, periodic falls, if you will, and there was a lot of dry dry wall, and then a waterfall, and dry wall and waterfall, that kind of thing. But there were I got some really good shots. That actually, one of them I put on the calendar, the cover of the calendar. That was that particular area. The water was just cascading down, and so that's a memory. But the Africa itself, oh my goodness. We were in Botswana, which has the largest concentration of African elephants in Africa. There are about 130 some thousand elephants there. And
Wow.
now they're spread throughout the country. Now, where we were on the Chobe River, and we were with a particular tour group, which is called Pangolin Photo Safari, Pangolin. And pangolin is actually an animal,
Yeah.
and it looks like kind of an armadillo. It's very prehistoric looking. We unfortunately didn't see any because I was just dying to get a picture of them because I had seen so many of them. But the pictures that we did get of the elephants, the giraffes, the lions, the birds. Oh my gosh, there are dozens and dozens of birds there. The crocodiles. Oh my goodness. There, never forget the crocs. And then we saw some big ones. I mean, we're talking 15 footers. Yeah, lying on the
Wow.
shore with their mouths open. And I mean, some of those were just, chilling, the thoughts of, uh, don't don't go swimming in the Chobe River.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Don't
So
do it.
that was such an incredible place. In the 6 days we were there, I took over 17,000 pictures. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and editing was, and editing, even though is a pain in some ways, I enjoy it because I get to relive the trip. And so literally brought up one picture at a time to decide whether or not this was worth keeping. And I edited it down to 50 some pics.
Wow.
And yeah, I'll bring those up now and we'll go through all 50. No, I'm teasing.
That's wonderful.
No.
It's amazing to cull down from that many thousand down to that little.
It's
I don't
well,
know
it's
how.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. But it does ring a bell for me, and that is that one of the things I love about photography is that a good photograph will tell you something or show you something.
Mhm.
A great photograph will make you feel something. And you know it almost instantly when you see a picture that really grabs you emotionally somehow. That it's a great photo. And when I'm taking pictures and when I'm teaching, I teach a course in photography there's a group. Yeah, we have here in Fayetteville, we have a wonderful organization that Sandra is intimately involved with. She's the assistant director, and Josh Rainey is our director of OLLI, which is Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And we have dozens and dozens of these organizations around the country. And they provide these wonderful courses on everything from photography to cooking to sewing to playing bridge to historical events, etc. And They're all lectures, about 2 hours, and some of them have multiple lectures. Very inexpensive, and it's a lifelong learning process, which is great. But my point being that when I'm talking about trying to teach people some photography principles, I say to them, don't photograph what you see, photograph what you feel. And that sounds a little weird, but when you think about it, every picture that you take is trying to tell a story. Okay. Well, what
Yeah.
are you feeling at that time? And so what you're feeling, that determines how you're going to take that picture. What angle are you going to use? What time of day? All sorts of things go into it. But yeah, I think the best pictures are the ones that evoke those feelings, whatever they are. So certainly Africa. I mean, that's when I win the lottery, we're going back. And then of course Antarctica. That was magical. I tried to get Rosie to go with me, but she kept saying, "If you think I'm going to Antarctica in winter, you're crazy." I said, "Honey, we're not going in the winter." I said, "We're going in January, height of their summer."
Oh.
And,
Okay.
and believe it or not, the air temperature there actually was about 30 degrees, 30 plus Fahrenheit. Um, and so it at times it was very warm,
Sure.
but at times we got into a couple storms. Um, talk about storms. We'll talk about the Drake Passage in a minute. But the the storm, most of the time, it was actually very comfortable. And
Mm.
she said that would still be too cold. She said, I'm not going to go. And I said, I love you, and I'll see you when I get back. Um, so, and we seriously, what was so much fun was that God bless AT&T and iPhones, because I was able to talk to her every day from the ship.
Wow.
Not all the time, because the ship broadcast their signals up to it. They had a satellite, um, somewhere up there, and so the signal would bounce off that, and then whatever. But um, I remember we do these Zoom calls once a week, my family. Then we're all, because I have 5 brothers and sisters, and we're scattered all over the country. And I actually was able to connect to the Zoom call from Antarctica, which was pretty amazing.
That is cool.
Yeah, but seriously, it's like being on another planet. The I've never been. Africa came close, but there was a pristine quality about Antarctica that was just absolutely magical. And the penguins, of course, we were, on land twice a day. And the reason I chose to go with National Geographic was that their selling point was they said we would have at least one National Geographic photographer on board to
That's
to
great.
work with. Well, all I can say is God smiled, because we didn't have one, we didn't have two, we had three
Wow.
National Geographic photographers on board. Um, and you talk about a photographer being in seventh heaven. Um,
Yeah.
it was just wonderful. These guys were so attentive and so helpful. And we were on land twice a day. We'd get into the Zodiac boats, and then we'd leave from the mothership. And we'd, fly over to the land, and then wander around on land for 2 hours. And so I had 4 hours a day for 6 days. Um, Actually, was it 6 or 7? Uh, no, we were on land 6 days. Yeah, and
Okay.
the rest was getting down there and getting back. but 4 hours a day with the tutorial of 3 National Geographic photographers. And you know, I took advantage of that, I think, more than most folks, because some of them were kind of intimidated by them, and yet they were very approachable. They weren't, you know, arrogant or condescending in any way.
That's nice. Yeah.
And the other reason I chose that ship was that we had lectures for 2 to 3 hours a day, every day. And we had on board, for example, we had a historian from Oxford who lectured us, actually almost, let's say, I'm trying to think, at least 2 lectures, each lecture being an hour long, on the history of the exploration of Antarctica. And that was fascinating, reading about or listening to him, you know, talk about the early explorers.
Yeah.
And, you know, Shackleton and everybody else, just fascinating.
Was one of the photographers is it Sartori or Sartori?
Joel Sartori. No, I wish he had been, because Sandra and I, you talk about using your photography for conservation, and boy, talk about an inspiration. Joel Sartori is just amazing. He's working on a project called the Photo Arc.
Yeah.
And he is photographing every living animal that he can. So far, he's photographed about 15,000.
It's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. And we wanted to get him for an Ollie course. The only problem was it was, well, shall we say, well above our budget.
Yeah.
And so, again, I'm going to start a GoFundMe page to
That's another
Joel.
Lottery winning moment.
Yeah, when that lottery comes through, finally, I'm going to be able to afford to have Joel. But I do have a couple of his CDs that he produced through National Geographic, which and he's a wonderful photographer. It's amazing
really great
stuff. Yeah,
we got to interview him for the magazine when we were doing that, and
oh gosh,
he was pretty neat.
Yeah, he's very approachable. You know, I think that was what. Yeah, that would be heaven to have lunch or dinner with Joel. You know, and so maybe we can get him for Ollie one day. So I'll let you know if we do. So.
We'll work on him.
We'll work on it.
Joel, if you're watching, just ignore this next moment.
Yeah.
We'll have him on the podcast, and then we'll talk to him about. We'll help you out, Doug.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, all contributions will be accepted. Hey, listen. There's one other quick story, and there's no such thing as a short story with me. But
go for it.
Here we go. The reason I chose National Geographic is that the ship, which is the Resolution, is the sister ship of their first ship like this. It's called the Endurance. And it has what's known as the X bow on the front. So it's curved. It's a semicircle. And people ask, well, who cares? And I said, well, if you get seasick, you care. Because the beauty of this ship is that, you know, the bows of most ships look like this.
Yeah.
Okay, they're raked back. And so what happens is when you hit waves, you ride up and you slam down. Okay. Well, with this ship, and remember there were 126 passengers and there were 112 crew, it would ride up, but then instead of slamming down, it would slice through the top of the wave.
Oh, neat.
And so you ended up doing this, swimming like a dolphin does. And
okay.
I'm very sensitive to seasickness. And for years, I've taken a drug or 2 drugs. One called Phenergan, which has been around for decades. It's an antiemetic. And then it makes you very sleepy. So then I took Sudafed to wake me up.
Not just caffeine.
Oh my.
Exactly. Well, one of our dearest friends down in the Florida Keys is this wonderful, wonderful guy named Jim Sharp, who's a fishing boat captain. And Rosie had been fishing, and well, we'd known Jim for 40 years. And Rosie won the 1986 Marlin tournament down there. She caught a 12-foot long, 520-pound blue marlin, and she brought it in an hour and 4 minutes. And we had that on a VCR tape. I used to go out with her, and I used to throw up for 6 or 7 hours. And I finally reached. I remember one time I've said, "Honey, I will pay you to take me back to shore." And she said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "I have spent thousands of dollars to enter this tournament, and you chose to come along, so you are going to ride it out."
You're good.
So I said, "Yes, dear." Two most important words to learn for any husband in marriage: "Yes, dear," and you say it with great sincerity. So.
Someone clip that.
Absolutely. If he can't say "yes, dear," dump him. He's not going to last. But anyway, the point being that Jim actually called me before I went to Antarctica, and he said, I've heard about this thing called Relief Band.
Yeah.
And I said, is it is it a rock group or what is it? And he said, no.
It's a charity rock group.
It's a charity rock group.
It's like Live Aid.
It looks like a watch, and it has a rechargeable battery. And what it does, it sends an electrical impulse up this nerve, and I can't remember what that's called, to the nausea centers of the brain. And it produces a tingle, and you can adjust it depending on which model you had. And it was like the one I had was the I think the sort of the Cadillac version. And so I wanted to try, what happens if you turn it up all the way. So I turned it up all the way, and my arms started going like this. I said I almost hit myself, so I had to be careful with it.
It's working.
It's working. But when we got into the Drake Passage, I'm walking down the hallway doing this. People thought I was having a spasm of some sort. So anyway, the point being that I turned it down, and
I'm so glad.
So anyway, we hit the Drake Passage, which is the roughest waters in the world, and we had what's known as an average Drake shake. An average Drake shake means the waves are about 10 to 20 feet tall. Wow. And they can get up to easily 30, 40 feet or more. Thank God we didn't hit those.
That's not kayakable.
No. Oh, no.
I think in kayaking, so.
Yeah, in kayaking. But I'll tell you, it was so much fun because I never got seasick or nauseous. I was one and I would say about half of the passengers, did. And so it was great for me because I got to wander around the ship and, get to know all the crew. It took us almost 3 days to get down because we went below the Antarctic Circle because the weather was actually good enough. And so during all that time, I got to photographers, and we got some great shots with their help of the albatrosses. Those beautiful, beautiful birds they're magical in the sense that they have a wingspan of about 10 to 11 feet, and you see them, they just glide on the currents, and they rarely have to flap their wings. And albatrosses, they mate for life. Yeah, and they lay one egg, and both parents take care of it, and they can live up to 50, 60 years. Wow. And they go back to the same breeding ground, and one will always arrive early and wait for the mate to arrive, and so that again, was part of the magic. And just jumping back with Sandra's question, the thing that surprised me the most about Antarctica was the ice itself. I had never, I always thought of ice as, I've got ice. We got ice here in Fayetteville
We've
once
seen
every
ice. Everybody
yeah,
has. Yeah.
it's, but there, what really enthralled me was the colors of the ice. Normally you think of ice as just being white. Well, guess what?
Mhm.
Ice can be many different colors.
Hmm.
And I took pictures of ice that was blue, that was gray, that was white, that actually had a kind of a black, tint to it. And it's all about the light, the way the angle of the light
Mhm.
hits with the ice crystals themselves that causes these different colors. Um, and you'll see that on my Instagram account, and you'll see it in your calendars next year, that um, the different shades of color that are available with ice, which is just uh, beautiful. I mean, just enthralling to look at. And that
Fascinating.
was the thing that actually surprised me the most. I knew we were going to get lots of great pictures of the penguins and the seals and the orcas and the whales. Um, and I've got, oh my gosh, on the Instagram account, I have pictures of the orcas, unfortunately, playing with some of the penguins.
Oh
They
yeah.
would,
Oh,
yeah, they threw them around to each other, kind of like basketballs,
They
which was
threw
oh,
penguins around.
real penguins. Yeah.
oh.
And it's, um,
And the
of course,
penguins
they're,
tolerate that. Like, please
well,
stop.
yeah. It was, yeah. They considered them an hors d'oeuvre. Let's put it that way.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's like a
It was
cat playing with a mouse, maybe.
exactly. So the, but one of the lecturers was a, we had two PhD students who were studying the penguins, and there are 18 breeds of penguins in the world, and there are eight different species in Antarctica of penguins. And of course, everybody thinks of the emperor penguins,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
unfortunately, we did not see the emperor penguins. We were not near their colonies, but we saw primarily three other species: the the Adeles, the Gentoos, and the oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Chin straps. Yeah, because they look like they have a little
Right.
chin strap. It's black line like this. And we tried. One of the other lecturers was a climatologist from Scripps out in California,
Yeah.
who was talking about climate change and how it affected Antarctica, and just some amazing facts about Antarctica, that it holds more. There's more fresh water in Antarctica in the ice than in any other place in the world. Um,
Really?
yeah, and the concern is, with climate change, with global warming, that ice, as it melts, is going to raise, water levels around the world.
Sure.
But one of the things that they told us is that the emperor penguin is the only penguin that lays its egg on sea ice. And sea ice is nothing more than a frozen layer of ice over the top of the ocean. And that ocean obviously is thousands of feet deep beneath that sea ice. And one of the big concerns is with global warming is that that sea ice is turning to slush
Mm.
far too early, so they're not able to complete the breeding cycle, the way they want to. Um, And do you guys remember that incredible documentary called March of the Penguins?
Yeah.
Yes, of course I do.
One of my favorites. That was a French photography team that was there for 18 months filming that, the original one. Um, and now it's changed because the ice is not extending as far as it used to.
Sure.
Yeah, the penguins now are not having to march nearly as far because I believe in that documentary it was like 70 miles, something. An incredible distance, and now they're marching as little as 20 or 30 miles, which is still a lot. But
For a little
it's
guy, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that's a long-winded answer to Sandra's question about where the favorite places.
Do you
It's
find that, like like there's that one picture of you when you were in Antarctica where there's penguins right behind you, and I thought, well, because in my brain they're automatically friendly. Not that that's true, obviously, but how close were you able to get? Were they used to humans at all, or did you go?
Well,
Did you have?
you could actually get very close. They wanted us to stay at least 15 to 20 feet away from them,
That's good.
and um, and one, I remember one time we were on land, and I was photographing, and I get tunnel vision when I photograph. So I when I see what I want, I'm just completely focused on that, and I felt something, you know, um, bumping up against my leg. And I looked down, and it was one of the penguins. And he was trying to get by me because there are these paths that they create by, all of them marching. And, you try and stay out of their way. And I'd been really careful not to get, near any of them. But I was so focused and locked in on photographing penguins that were, but depending on the breed, the gentoos, they like to build little nests out of pebbles,
Oh,
and they lay their egg on the rock. And so I was photographing because they will steal each other's rocks,
oh,
and so that there's always this kind of little, going on about, don't steal my rocks. And the so this penguin wanted to get by me, but I was standing kind of right in the middle of the path. And so I looked down, and there he was, and he looked up at me. And so I said, sorry. And then I stepped back, and he just waddled, right on by. They are so much fun to photograph, though, because they are so photogenic. I mean, they're
oh,
just,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to take a really bad picture of the penguins, because there are just so many of them, and they're adorable. So that was great. Anyway,
Yeah. Holding up penguin traffic.
yeah, holding up penguin traffic. Yeah, but I would again. I would go back to Antarctica in a heartbeat. And as I mentioned to you earlier, before we started, for folks who are listening who didn't hear me say this, there are big concerns about avian flu infecting the penguin colonies. And so, for example, we had to disinfect our boots before we left the ship and when we came back, and we weren't allowed to put anything on the ground. I had a backpack with my camera equipment, and I wasn't allowed, and no one was allowed to put their camera equipment, or any kind of backpack on the ground. But they said from this last winter, well, the tourist season is from November through March, because the rest of the months it's uninhabitable. I mean, that's not true. Antarctica has about 1,000 people who stay year round. Yeah, and
Still a surprising number, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Because 6 months of those years, or not four, no, 4 out of the 6 months, something like that. It's total darkness, and
Oh,
the
I
temperatures
don't.
are 40, 50, 60. Um, so this is an unusual breed that chooses to stay down there.
Yeah.
They're they're scientists, and they're, God bless them for their work. I could never do that. But during um, the tourist season, they estimated this past season they had over 100,000 people who came down there on the ships. And as I had mentioned, some of the ships they never get off; they just cruise down to the
Sure.
Antarctic Peninsula and go back, which I think is a shame. Because what I got to do was, for example, we went into abandoned research station, and
Cool.
I took pictures. Oh,
Yeah.
it was great. They had a little library there. This was from 1970. It was a British research station that had closed.
Okay.
A little library, and one of the books that was open was Jack London's Call of the Wild. And I
Perfect.
remember, yeah, mom and dad reading that to me when I was young.
That's
Things like
incredible.
that. Yeah, the connection is just amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
What other?
good.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What other animal encounters have you had, like the penguin one? Like, have you been? You've obviously gotten close enough to photograph them, which I know you can do with some pretty great lenses. But what other animals have you had encounters with?
Well, while I was in Antarctica, the orcas. I've got one of the pictures that's on the Instagram is um, we were in the Zodiac boats, and the orcas swam. Um, they come in small groups, which are called pods,
Yeah.
and the one of the large males, and you can tell there's a the senior member, if you will, the apex predator of that group. That you can tell by their dorsal fin. The males are larger than the females, and this
Hmm.
guy was, oh my goodness, they estimated probably about 25 feet long. Um, and we're in a zodiac that is maybe 20 feet,
Oh.
and there were 8 or 10 of us, and we had been watching this pod come up behind us. We were on our way back, to the boat after being on land, and we watched this fin, this dorsal fin, come straight towards the back of the boat, and you know,
Did the
I,
Jaws music
I
start
looked,
playing?
I looked at the guy and said, "Does he know we're here?" It's suddenly the dorsal fin just drops, just disappears,
Huh.
and it goes. This large male goes right under the boat, and I fortunately, because I positioned myself in the front because I that's the best place to get photographs, because I could swing to either side without bumping into anybody. And I saw his head come up right in front of the boat. And so I got a picture of him, the blowhole that they inhale and exhale
Yeah.
from. Right. I mean, if I had leaned over the front further, I could have touched it.
Wow.
And I saw this massive body. It looked like a mini submarine just going
Yeah.
right up in front of us. And that is a memory I will carry forever. It was so exciting. So that was wonderful. The, Jumping back to Africa, I've got on the Instagram. I have a little video clip of a herd of elephants that came up to uh, a watering hole. They had parked the boat right in the grass, the front, right up on shore. And these boats it was 30 feet long. There were 8 seats right down the center, and each one of us is sitting there with all this gear. And Ro- it's so funny. Rosie is sitting there in the chair, and before we even started the trip, the guide, his name was Grant. He said, "Tell us about your equipment." And so everybody was showing their equipment, and Rosie, and they came to Rosie and said, "Rosie, what did you bring?" She said, "This." You know, she had her iPhone, and that was it. That was the only thing she brought, and she got as good pictures as I did, except for the ones that are far away.
Sure.
And that's the advantage of these longer lenses. iPhones and the Android phone, etc. They're wonderful, but you can only get so close.
Sure.
And then of course when you enlarge it, that's another issue too. But anyway, my point is that we were there, and this herd of elephants came up, and I have about a 30-second clip on there. If you ever get a chance, please go to that Instagram and look at that video.
It's Doug Talbott Jr. Photos on Instagram. You'll find it.
Yeah, you go find it. It's in there, and it shows the elephants drinking the water, and they were literally one of them was they said we estimated about 6 feet away from the front of the boat. And then there's in that same clip, this little baby elephant comes up and starts drinking too. So that, again, it's photograph what you feel, and the videos and the pictures that just grab your heart. Those are the ones to remember, and I'll remember that one forever. And there are several others, but I know I'm looking at the clock. I'm concerned about time.
It's been an hour. We can go a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Unless you need to go. Does Stella need another break?
I'm good for another 4 or 5 hours. So no, I'm teasing, but any other questions people might have, about this wonderful journey that we're all on.
I do actually have a question while we're waiting for some of our lovely audience to filter in some questions. So I know that you've been an educator up until 2019 at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville.
Sure.
And there are so many people when they become professionals that share their craft with others and inspire others. What are some pieces of advice that you have shared with your students through your classes?
Well, I was teaching. I did a lot of academic advising, helping guide students to whatever path they wanted to take. Now, I was in the Department of Education, so obviously the first path, or the most natural path, was for folks to teach. But my approach was that you really have to follow your bliss. And one of my favorite authors is a philosopher named Joseph Campbell. And a quote that I always remember was, he said, "Follow your bliss and the universe will open doors for you that you never knew were there." And it's hard when you're, in your 20s to figure out what you want to do. I mean, my goodness, I changed my major 4 times in college and ended up as an English major. But my point being, is that you too, Emily? Were you an English major?
I was, yeah. I switched as well. I went from business to English.
Did you? Yeah.
Here we are.
Here we are. Hey, did you ever change your major, or did you stick with music the whole time?
I almost switched my major, actually, but I wound up sticking with music.
What did
Yeah.
you? I want to know what you almost switched. Was it mechanical engineering?
um, it was actually it was psychology.
There
Um,
you go. Yeah, I
Okay,
went back.
valid.
Yeah, I went back and got a second bachelor's in psychology at night. That was interesting. But that's a long story too. But anyway, the my point being that I tried to guide them, whatever their bliss was, and I said, what are you really interested in? And the problem that a lot of them face is that mom and dad, who are footing the bill, want them to do certain things, and it was difficult for them to change their path. And so I would try to be as gently persuasive to the parents, particularly when the student did not want to pursue what parents wanted. And I think that's the first thing that I tried to teach them is follow your bliss. The second thing I tried to teach them was don't feel that you have to have a career that you stick with for 20 or 30 years. I said, particularly in today's world, you're seeing people use careers as stepping stones.
Yeah.
And you might do something for X amount of years and then suddenly decide you want to switch. Um, also taught him one of my favorite phrases is that if you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plans. And that's so true for all of us. I thought I was going to end up, being Mr. Chips and private school or public school, English for 30 years and then, never leave that school and whatever.
Right.
And that didn't happen. And yet I ended up very happy, doing what I did.
That's good. That's important,
So,
though. I mean, I think a lot of people are. I think everyone is probably to some degree, multi-passionate, and
yeah,
it's definitely valuable to explore those. Whether you're doing one thing for 20 years or for 5 or 1, knowing what you want to do and going and doing it is really what matters. Not
exactly.
not that you stuck with a career for 40 years or whatever.
Well, look at Ming, that you interviewed 2 weeks ago. Ming graduated from Yale with an engineering degree, and then
Yeah.
ended up, being, a world famous chef. So, and I tried to encourage them to say it's okay to change. It's all life to me is chapters, and that one of the beauties of life is that you never know what the next chapter is going to be.
Right.
And it's a great exploration. It's an adventure. I mean, life should be an adventure.
I
Um,
think so.
and that's what I tried to, because in my office I had pictures that I had taken, from different trips, um, and it always sparked conversations about adventure and travel and you know trying different things. Don't be afraid. Um, John Wayne said that courage is being scared to death but saddling up anyway.
Yeah,
And
I've heard that too.
yeah, and that's a popular one. And I think a lot of us get afraid, and particularly I saw this in my students. They were afraid to try something different, try a different major, for example, or during the summer break or the semester break, get a job doing something you've never tried before.
Yeah,
Um,
or
you know, and
going to France and trying cooking instead for a while.
yeah, exactly, or
Um,
whatever.
there are a
Yeah,
few questions in our chat. I want to make sure we don't miss those.
sure,
Um,
go ahead.
one of them was from Josh, our moderator, who said, "Did I miss the story behind the nickname?" And I feel like, were we talking about that and I missed it? I don't know, but
I'm sorry, did we miss the story about what?
he said, "Did I miss the story behind the nickname? Is it your nickname?" Maybe
Oh,
he'll respond. Maybe we can. I'll wait for him to respond to that. Otherwise, one other question is, what is the most frightening location you've been to in your journey? In your journeys.
oh boy. Um, well, I'll get back to Josh too, because I
Okay.
want to, because everybody in my family has a nickname. Okay,
Oh.
and that's important.
Okay.
But I'll answer the second one first. Name. Certainly, one of them was scuba diving.
Hmm.
Um, I was I did a pretty good amount of underwater photography, and then I gave it up because I found that I was spending too much time worrying about photographing and not enough enjoying the diving.
Hmm.
Um, so I remember I was photographing. I would We were in a semicircle, and it was one of those shark feed things where they would um, a diver would come down and sit in the center of the semicircle, and the, the diver would have a chainmail suit on in case the sharks decided to try to bite him. And I'm not a big fan of this shark feeding thing, by the way, because they associate food with humans, and that's not a good thing. But anyway, they we were photographing the sharks, and there were uh, we were in a school of what's known as bull sharks. There are about 500 species of sharks in the world,
Wow.
and oh, that's a fascinating creature. We could do a whole lecture on sharks because they are so important, and we're decimating them for shark fin soup, which we shouldn't be doing. But
Hmm. Yeah.
these are the apex predators in the food chain, and they do a terrific job of culling or eating the sick and diseased fish. And if you don't have enough sharks, then you have too many sick and diseased fish entering the food chain, which is a problem. But anyway, we were photographing these bull sharks, and I have my camera up like this, and I'm looking at the viewfinder, and I said, okay, well, this is a pretty good composition. And so I was, fiddling with some of the knobs. And the shark, I noticed, just kept getting closer and closer. And this is a good sized bull shark. We're talking about a 6 or 7 footer. And
Yeah.
it's, I said, how close is that? And as I looked up over the top of the camera, I saw his mouth open, and he literally clamped down on my camera. And
Oh.
this, this, and this brings a whole new meaning to wetsuit. Because I, I, I let go of the camera, and this guy just literally pushed me out of the way as he swam by me like this. And bull, bull sharks, they have the highest level of testosterone per kilogram of body weight of any shark in the ocean. They're extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
Um, and they can swim in both fresh and salt water. So, um, anyway, so he swims off. I'm sitting there doing like this. I mean, I was literally shaking. And he swims off and drops the camera about 10, 15 feet away from me. And I swam over, and there were his teeth marks embedded in the plastic case, the underwater case.
Wow.
And so, I took this back to the dive store and said, "You'll never guess what happened." And they said, "What?" I said, "Those are bull shark teeth marks." Um, and they went, "Wow." So,
Like this never happens.
never happened. But I did get what was great about that. I got a couple of great shots of his mouth, you know,
Oh,
right before. And
amazing. Are
Oh,
those on your Instagram too?
no, and those are not on the Instagram. To be honest with you, I don't know where those are, and I have been looking for those for years, thinking, "Oh gosh, wouldn't that be great frame that and enlarge it.
Yeah. What a cool
But
story behind it too. Yeah.
yeah, fun story. That was the one that I think scared me the most. Really, because I'm thinking back on Africa or Australia, Europe, New Asia. No, um, yeah, some magical. I'm thinking of magical dives, but nothing terribly scary. Other than that one, that was the
Okay.
worst one. So, yeah.
Another question was, will you ever write about your adventures?
Oh my goodness. There's a book in there, I'm sure, or more than one. In some ways, it jumps back to what I said at the very beginning, and how my grandfather wrote that book called The Cabin. Um, it would be fun to write um, a book about all these travels, and the adventures that I've been lucky enough to be on. And looking forward to more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've at the top of the bucket list. We've got coming up next April. We're going out west to some of the national parks that I've never photographed.
Oh.
Bryce, Zion, the Grand Canyon, Lake Powell, and Monument Valley, and we're going to tour those. So there's a whole nother calendar, guys, in there,
All right.
which will be
Sign us
fun.
up.
Yeah, and then after that, we'd like to go to the Galapagos Islands.
Oh, yeah. Good
Yeah,
animals there.
ah, Darwin's. Yeah, if you want to read a really interesting book, read Darwin's Origin of the Species. That's an amazing, insightful book. Remember, and he only spent about 5 weeks. I'm sorry, was it 5 weeks or 5 months? Um, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm 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 having a what's known as a fog moment. That we're back to nicknames now. So,
That's up to you if you want to talk about it.
well, that's it. I will. It's
Okay.
fun. But seriously, he was on a 5-year voyage around the world, 1831 to 1836, on the HMS Beagle, and they spent, I've forgotten the exact amount of time in the Galapagos Islands, but that was what his collections and his observations about the differences in species between the islands was the basis for his work on the origin of the species and survival of the fittest and hereditary traits and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, everybody in my family has a nickname, and Ming, for example, Ming's nickname is King. We call him King Ming.
I'm sure he hates that, right?
He hates it. Yes, he hates it. And my wife, her real name is Martha, but her nickname is Rosie because
Okay.
she has a very rosy disposition, and,
Oh,
which
I
is
like
very,
that.
yeah. And then, oh my gosh, I've got 3 brothers. We Rich is we call Rich we call him Bob, and then my Mark, we call him Sparky, and then we call my next youngest brother David, we call him Bean, and then my youngest sister Polly, we call her Pooh, and then my oldest sister, who's 1 year older than I am, Wendy's is really just sort of a shortened name. We call her Win, and then my nickname is Fog, and it's a great story about how I got that nickname. I never can remember it. So it's
Oh, I see what you did there.
but yeah, just sort of the absent-minded professor, sort of gets lost in the fog, and as you can see from this interview, it's easy for me to go down several different roads. all at once. So anyway, when we get together, it's a lot of fun because you hear, everybody calling each other nicknames, and we're very blessed because our family is so close. And as I mentioned, we have a Zoom meeting every Sunday, and not
Awesome.
everybody's able to, yeah, to talk, to get on every week, but I feel so lucky that we have that closeness, because we know we can, you know, count on each other for anything, on any time. And particularly as we get older. Mm.
That's awesome, though. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah,
it should be.
it should be. You're right, Emily. And I'm convinced the most important things we all have in our lives are our families and friends. That's really what makes life worthwhile. And all these wonderful trips we've been on, it's making new friends, and sharing that, with our family members, and which I'm doing through photography. And one thing I just want to touch on is that I'm trying to figure out how to use my photography, um, for conservation, um, in better ways or more ways, I should say, not let's say better, but I mean, I support different groups, like the World Wildlife Fund
Hmm.
and Nat Geo, and there's one that some people may not be aware of. It's called the NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council.
Hmm. Okay.
They do a lot of legal work to uh, protect wildlife, or to sue certain organizations or policies that are destructive to wildlife. And I think that's really important to try and figure out how can I help save, these beautiful creatures that I've been able to see,
Yeah.
and photograph. And so when I'm experimenting with, I want to just take my pictures and send them to these different organizations and say, hey guys, I don't expect any payment for these because I don't do this for money. Just
Right.
um, if you can use these in any way, use them, and if they can inspire people to do it. And it's amazing how one picture can make a difference. I don't know. You guys may remember this, but this was many years ago. There was a guy who signed up on a tuna fishing boat, and he signed up as a cook, and he took videos of dolphins being dragged up in the tuna nets. And that inspired so many people to alter the way the tuna fishermen,
Yes.
were catching them. You guys remember
I
that?
remember that movement happening. Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Just
there's anti-dolphin logos on the tuna cans now, or at least most of them, or they were
yeah,
anyway
exactly.
for a long time.
No, that's true. That's true. And what do they call it? Dolphin safe tuna or
Dolphin
something.
safe. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Um, and then there was a picture National Geographic did, of the last surviving white rhino, northern white rhino. It was on the cover of one of the Nat Geos. This was back in 2018. Um, and it showed the rhino lying on its side as it was taking its last breaths, and the caretaker had wrapped his arms around it, and it was just it brought tears to my eyes because it
Yeah.
was such a powerful photograph. And things. My point being that we need to take care of this planet. It's the only one we got, and it really is a living, breathing organism, and all of these inhabitants, the wildlife, we need to learn to cohabitate, better, and we can do that. We can do that. I mean, we just have to get enough people on board, and I think one of the ways to inspire people, is through photography. So that's a mission on, is to try to get more people to take care of all these beautiful critters.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they deserve a life too. They really do.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, one thing I was going to make sure is everybody can find you and follow your work on Instagram until you have your website going. And your Instagram is Doug Talbott. Talbott has 2 T's at the end. Junior, JR Photos on Instagram. So Doug Talbott Junior Photos. So people can go find you there and follow you and watch your adventures happen, and also look back at your past adventures and see some of the cool things we've talked about today and things like that. And hopefully you'll find that picture of the inside of the shark mouth and get to post that. We'd love to see it.
I'll send it to both of you, if I and Josh too, because I know he's on.
He would love that too.
Yeah. If I can ever find that photo, that's that's always haunted me. It's like, where did that picture go? Yeah. So maybe the shark swallowed it. You never know.
He just swallowed the whole card.
That's right. He took the film out. Yeah. Crazy. Well, and gosh, I don't want to talk too long here, guys, because I know, we do have time limits. But what a treat for me to be able to visit with all 3 of you, and anybody who's been watching. I hope it's been helpful, because I'm so lucky. I live a very charmed life, and a very grateful life. And I want to close with something that my favorite prayer that I say every morning is, Lord, please help me want what I have. And I think that's so important, because all of us can appreciate, all the good things that we have in life, and all of us do have a lot of good things. So that's important, I think, too.
There's a lot to be grateful for.
Feel that appreciation. Yeah, exactly.
I think that is an incredible way to wrap up our show tonight. Doug, honestly, this has been incredible. You have lived such an adventurous life. You have so many stories to tell. And it is clear by the audience that we've had here today that you are also very much loved for what you do. So thank you so much for being on tonight.
It's been my pleasure, really, Trey, Emily. Thank you. You guys are a gift, and Josh too.
Thank you.
Yeah, for what you do. It's artists, love to share, and you provide a platform for that. So thank you for your work. Really, it's wonderful.
Thank you for those words. That helps us keep going, for sure.
Absolutely.
We feel like we're doing something right sometimes.
You're doing great work, so please keep it up. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
All right,
this episode, along with every other episode moving forward, is in memory of Joe Capone, our moderator, fellow comedian, passionate encourager, and greatly missed friend. You can find us pretty much wherever you tune into podcasts. For updates, announcements, and more, please follow us on social media under Modern Romantic. Thank you, everybody. And I hope tomorrow or today or right now that you're able to photograph something that you feel. Have a great day and have a great rest of your life.
Thanks, everybody.